Camera comparison between the Oppo Find X6 Pro versus the Vivo X90 Pro Plus. They both have 1-inch sensors, so let's find out the differences. The Oppo does have their own Hasselblad colors, but is only available in Pro mode. You do have the option to turn on Zeiss colors in the auto mode, so for both phones they are off. With the ultra wide angle when you're outdoors, it does look like you can see just a bit more in the shadows. Sometimes it is a bit obvious, but for the people under the tent or even the tent color itself, it is just a bit brighter on the Vivo. When you're indoors, it seems like the color temperature is slightly different. It's a bit warmer on the Oppo. Of course, people's skin color as well, and that's the same with outdoors too. People's skin do look a bit more red, but I'll say the highlights on the Oppo can be a bit too much. When we move to nighttime, the Oppo does have the warmer picture, the Vivo is clearly cooler. So it really depends on what is your preference on color temperature. In this shot, the Vivo is a bit brighter than the Oppo, and then you can tell by the sky as well. But in this next clip, it starts pretty dark and you can clearly tell that the Oppo is pretty low on the shutter speed. It's kind of like lagging around, whereas the Vivo is darker but still kind of smooth when you're panning. For stabilization and clarity, the Vivo might have an edge just because I don't see the micro jitters going on too much, especially when you're looking at the light. Now, the great thing about these phones is they have a 1-inch main sensor. So naturally they do produce a pretty good background blur. And also they do pretty good at low light as well because it's a bigger sensor and it collects more light. So when you're indoors in a bar or even like a dark hallway going to the bathroom, you're still gonna get a good looking picture. So I think the biggest difference between the two is mainly color temperature and the color, but the overall quality seems pretty similar. Now I do notice the shadows is on and off. Sometimes the Oppo is a bit darker, sometimes you can find the Vivo to be just a bit darker. Like looking at the sign or even at the blacks on the truck, the Oppo does have the deeper blacks. Now, shooting pictures with the 1-inch sensor is really nice to get that nice background blur. It's very natural and you don't need to use like portrait mode to get the fake background blur, which may not be perfect. And looking at these pictures, it does seem like the Vivo does have the darker shadows, but if you move on to the next picture, the Oppo seems to be darker in the shadows. So it's really back and forth and it's not always consistent, so it really depends on the software and where it picks up. Shooting telephoto with these phones are really nice around 3x, which is something I'm finding myself doing more with these phones. Even though the telephoto sensor is smaller than the main sensor, you can still get some good background blur. Both of these phones can zoom in really well, so 100x on a Vivo and 120x on the Oppo. I think shooting up to 10x is really good, and between 3 to 10 is where probably the common people would zoom around anyways. Beyond that, it doesn't look that great, especially if you're going max zoom, which I don't think it's great for taking pictures, but if you need to see something or read something from afar, then it's gonna be way more useful. But if I have to pick one of them, I would go with the Vivo just because I do see a bit more in the details, even though the Oppo can zoom in a bit more. Now for low light, it does seem like the Oppo will do a better job, but then again, I don't think I'll be using the telephoto up to that extent in a dark situation. Now for portrait mode, the Oppo can offer you 1x and 3x, where the Vivo will give you 1x, 2x, and 3.5x. I do like having more options, and 2x is a great length for you to be indoors or outdoors, where I think the 3x or 3.5x is just too much to be using when you're indoors. And for personal preference, I think the 1x is just too wide with the background and it doesn't look like a portrait picture. Also, the Vivo do have another mode where you can change the background mode, so they have different styles or different Zeiss styles, whereas the Oppo, they only have their own specific filters, which the Vivo also has as well. So the portrait mode experience on a Vivo is just slightly better with more options for you to explore. But overall, these phones are really good quality cameras, and I think having 1-inch sensors is the right directions to probably push Apple and Samsung to add on their own as well. And speaking of those phones, I do have comparison with the Oppo versus the iPhone and Samsung, so go ahead and check them out. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.